People often ask me, especially now that I've filed for federal office, why not run for local office first or state office first? Why not start small or just do something else to inch your way into politics? After all, you can do a lot of good when you do local office community work, right? I fully believe that too. That's the thing a lot of people don't understand is I'm already part of the community. I want my community to succeed. I love the Triangle. I love Raleigh and the adjacent suburbs. But in order for Raleigh, Cary, Morrisville, Zebulon, Knightdale, Gardner, and all those places to be successful at the local neighborhood level, you need to stop populism and autocracy. Donald Trump is a populist and he is an autocrat. And the alarm bells, while they have been sounded, people don't know what the hell to do about it. And that's why we need new leaders in the federal government, namely in Congress. That is probably the number one reason, if not one of the main reasons, why I'm running for Congress. Because for all of Deborah Ross's qualities, and she has some good qualities, for all of the good qualities of other Democrats even, they are not well equipped to deal with populism and autocracy because they've never seen it before. When they started working in places like the General Assembly and other stops at the local level, they never had to deal with a populist or an autocrat. You need specialists to come in and solve some of these problems. If there's one thing that I learned to do well in my career, it's take a problem like clean energy or climate change and just come in and work hard every day to figure out what can we do to help solve this problem. And over the last several months, over the last 6 months really, that is what I dedicated my research and my day-to-day life, frankly, doing with things like the Interactive Community Policy Memo, all right? The government is like a tree. People just often don't know it. So again, tying it back to the neighborhood level, to the local government level, a lot of the grants that allow local governments to invest in things like housing, public safety, transportation, energy, and all the topics that everyday people care about, a lot of that money comes from the federal government. For example, JAG funds are used to fund local police activities. The Department of Energy has several grants that help fund clean energy projects all the way down to the local and state level. The Department of Transportation has several initiatives like the STBG grants that help fund sidewalks and everyday improvements to transportation to give people the ability to, have economic mobility from one place to another. And that is why when the federal government tree is being starved to death, as it is right now under Donald Trump, his populism, and his autocracy, we don't set up our local governments for success. We don't. And the only way to change that is with new federal leaders. That's why, win or lose this primary, this race, doing something about federal politics to stop populism and to stop autocracy is a non-negotiable for me. That is my goal. That is why I am here. That is why I put myself out on a limb and took, frankly, a big risk to run for Congress in the state of North Carolina and, frankly, challenge a very powerful Democratic Party establishment. Is because if we want to set up our community, our small businesses, and our people for success, we need to stop populism. We need to stop autocracy. But more importantly, let's talk about how autocracy and populism hurts your bottom line. While most people don't really know what autocracy looks like, it sounds like kind of some vague thing. What the Brookings Institute, a well-known economic research group, has found is that countries with populist leaders on the left or right both see a 10% decline in GDP per capita within the first 15 years. Meanwhile, countries with very strong democracies see increases in GDP growth per capita roughly around 20 to 25% around the same time. But let's play a simple game if you're listening to this at home, because not only do you see changes in GDP, but it hurts so many countless types of businesses when populism and autocracy take root. So raise your hand if this applies to you. If you're a business with high exposure to government decisions, raise your hand. If you're a business reliant on public investments or public services, raise your hand. If you're a business that invests over a longer time horizon, a good example of this is scientific research, or if you work in energy, especially, which many people in the triangle in my district do, raise your hand. If you're a business that relies on a highly educated labor force, all right, in my district, most people have a bachelor's degree, and most jobs that you see around here, frankly, they're pretty white collar, so they require a highly educated workforce. So if that's you, raise your hand in the triangle. Business and media, entertainment, and communications. There are certainly some of those here in the triangle. Raise your hand. Business and science, medicine, and education. Not only are those topics important to me, those are topics that are important to our incumbent, Deborah Ross, and to countless firms within a Research Triangle Park. So everyone who works in Research Triangle Park, raise your hand. If you're an in-person business, or a business that relies on tourism, a lot of these are small businesses. Raise your hand. Why do these businesses get hurt? It's because it causes chaos at the government level that hurts the entire economy. When democracy hits a backslide, it creates immense regulatory hurdles. It leads to higher costs for consumers. The easiest example of that is Trump with his tariffs. And it just causes mass uncertainty about not just markets, but about what the rules, policies, and laws are going to be in the future that affect how businesses operate. And so that's why those 7 types of businesses I just mentioned are not only being hurt right now in the triangle as we speak, but they will continue to be hurt more and more over time, unless we do something to stop Donald Trump, his autocracy, and keep populism in check. Even worse, now that we're in the era of super PACs and corporate money influencing our politics, the politicians that are on Capitol Hill are more out of touch than ever before. And when those super PACs and interest groups come calling, they always get on the line first with their member of Congress, not the normal everyday people. To be clear, I am not a populist. I don't believe in populism. That doesn't mean that some of my ideas as someone running for Congress aren't popular, all right? People want expanded access to healthcare, and my plan for universal healthcare coverage, for example, will do just that. So it doesn't mean that we can't talk about things that are popular or promote things that are popular with the people, but the key trick to understanding how you stop populism is that you need more diverse viewpoints and perspectives within not just Congress, but in politics in general. And for too long, we have disenfranchised people in politics and encouraged the 2 major parties to frankly rely on groupthink, which is not good for anyone. So how do we stop populism? How do we stop groupthink? Well, I'm going to first refer to a book that I recommend you all get. It's called simply What Is, let's see if I can scroll in there. What is Populism by, he's got a funny name, John Werner Muller? I think I'm saying that right. Anyway, it's actually really short, somewhat nuanced book about populism. It's a good read. He gives a few key quotes at the very end that really give us a trick to stopping populism in its tracks, whether it's on the left or the right. And one of the quotes is, populism then should force defenders of liberal democracy to think harder about what current failures of representation might be. It should also push us to address more general questions like How do you have belonging to the polity, to politics, in other words? And what exactly is pluralism worth preserving? So that's one quote. And then one of the very final quotes he says in his afterword on, where is it? Right here, page 114, at the very end. The thing about populism is it relies on a lie that there is a singular people of which they are the only representatives. In other words, populists try to say that only they represent the people. To fight them, one needs to understand and undermine that core claim. Let me repeat the end of that. So, to fight them, in this sense, populism, one needs to understand and undermine the core claim. The core claim being that only one group, one party, one person represents the everyday people. That is how you stop populism, folks, is you make it so that everyone finds a voice for them. I'm running for Congress. I have a lot of popular ideas, but I'm not out to be everyone's best friend. I'm frankly not even out to appeal to everyone. Spoiler alert, that's not how you actually win a race because everyone's going to have different views. Nothing's going to change that. So, my biggest solution to stopping populism is getting rid of the two-party system because that prevents the far left and the far right populists from not only gaining power, but it forces everyone to work with each other for the betterment of democracy. In other words, it stops and undermines populism in its tracks. So just to give a good example of this, we saw how Trump's big, beautiful bill, and of course he is a populist, how that effectively got passed over the summer through a strict party line vote. And the consequences of the big, beautiful bill are going to be immense. It's not only going to add a lot more to the debt, but it's going to reduce funding for SNAP and other food benefit programs. It's going to raise healthcare premiums for millions of Americans. It's a terrible bill. We all knew that. But it only passed on a party line Republican vote. How do we stop something like that? Well, if we had multi-member districts, which is what proportional representation is, then Republicans, even if someone like Donald Trump were in office, would have had to go negotiate with other members of Congress because no one party would ever have a massive majority of the seats in Congress. You would have people of all sorts of viewpoints represented in Congress. That is how you stop something like the one big beautiful bill from passing to begin with. That is how you stop populism. So again, that's just one of the keys to stopping populism is just actually make it so that Congress really looks and is represented by the people, and there's no two parties dominating it. There's either several parties or a small mix of parties and a bunch of independents that are in there. That is how you stop populism. The other key to stopping autocracy is reforming the executive branch. I'm going to do a separate video about that because that is its own can of worms in and of itself. I'm actually going to have a few Substack posts about that topic either today or sometime this week. So you can check those out as well. We will make a separate video. But I also want to talk about some other bills that are currently in Congress that I'm going to support if I get elected to help North Carolina's economy bounce back from autocracy. Because like I mentioned, when the government tree is starving and when the federal government especially doesn't have the support it needs in terms of personnel, funding, and other resources to succeed, then the community level gets harmed. So here's a couple things we can do to help change that. I want to support the Protect Our Probationary Employees Act. This bill is designed to protect recently terminated federal workers. It would ensure that those employees that were basically let go by Donald Trump and Elon Musk have an easier path to being reinstated, and they don't have to go through a longer probationary period. Another bill that's worth flagging is the Reduction in Force Review Act, which would give Congress the ability to overrule any president's workforce cuts at all federal agencies, including the EPA, the Department of Health and Human Services, and others. In other words, Trump used what's called reduction in forces to basically just go scorched earth on a lot of federal agencies over the last 6 to 7 months. What the Reduction in Force Act will do is put stricter guardrails and allow more congressional oversight over how reduction in forces are done. I won't explain all the details here, but that is essentially the gist of how it works. I also support the Rehire and the PrEP Act, which would make it easier for federal employees who are wrongfully fired by the Trump administration to be rehired. So similar to the probationary rule or Protect Our Probationary Employees Act, this will just simply make it easier to hire people at the federal level. A couple other things that need to be done to really help North Carolina and its communities bounce back from the damage from Trump's autocracy is we need a new process to give members of Congress more oversight of how, presidential advisors are selected or utilized. In other words, we need to actually prevent oligarchs like Elon Musk from just coming in and randomly firing people. That should not have been allowed to happen earlier this year. We need new rules to prevent that. And lastly, I want to establish a new federal economic task force to work with businesses, universities, nonprofits, and other organizations that were affected by the hijacking of the federal government by Donald Trump and Elon Musk, help to reinstate grants, projects, programs, and initiatives that were in place to help the community before Donald Trump 2.0 came around. We need to get those programs either revamped or restarted so that we can finally have the federal government tree help people at the local level and help our local elected officials, because, like I said at the beginning of this video, that is the best way, in my opinion, to help the community. Is as great as running for local office is, and I deeply respect that, the best way to set up municipalities and local governments for success is have a strong federal government, because the federal government is like a tree, and when the tree gets starved, as Donald Trump is doing now, every organism, everything that relies around the ecosystem, in other words, all sorts of different businesses, all sorts of people, all sorts of local government services, they all get starved. They all suffer when Donald Trump is an autocrat and when he relies on populism. Thanks for watching. This obviously was a sort of loaded topic to talk about populism and autocracy. I'll admit, it is somewhat nuanced, and you can't just walk outside and see autocracy. So that's what I think makes it so hard to stop, is that you really have to delve into the details of how it works to understand how to stop it. And that requires really bold action and really bold initiative from new federal leaders. Frankly, not just me, but we need other people running for Congress across the country to take a very similar approach to the one I've put out there, not just in this video, but within my own platform. Of course, simple housekeeping. If you want to help make this a reality, we need your help. We need volunteers. We need people to donate to my campaign. We need people to help spread the word and help connect the community. Without those sort of things, you know, we know how elections go when they don't. We know how campaigns, go when they don't get the support. Your support is appreciated, and thank you so much for watching this video. Consider donating to my campaign. Like, rate, subscribe, share this video with 6 friends of yours, and I'll see you in the next one.